Let's go. All right. Wealth attraction research or intro to economics. You're listening to Wealth Attraction Research or Intro to Economics. I should state, hello Chuck, that this is inspired in part by my website, exercisingyourmind.com, exercisingyourmind.com, where I say that great health is the truest of all wealth, and this is something that I've held sacred, not secret, for a long time. And that is all tying into it and will all be coming together. Right now, I am going to be currently reading from the Little Book of Economics, coming off the tail end of reading from How Many Works. And when I finished up that introduction and a few things, it was going to lead into the emergence of modern economics. So, fortunately, these subjects about money and economics are all related. So, here we go with the Little Book of Economics. I'll first start while this populates here by sharing who some of the contributors are. We have Neal Kishtani, consultant editor. Neal Kishtani teaches at the London School of Economics and specializes in economic history and development. He has worked for the World Bank and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. George Abbott is a UK economist who worked in 2012 on Barack Obama's presidential re-election campaign. He previously worked with Compass, the influential UK think tank, on strategic documents such as Plan B, A New Economy for a New Society. John Farndon is the London-based author of many books on contemporary issues and the history of ideas, including overviews of the booming economies of China and India. By the way, those are two countries in BRICS, BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa coalition, who may be on August 22nd getting together to issue a new global economy. Frank Kennedy. Frank Kennedy worked for over 25 years in investment banking in the City of London as a top-ranked investment analyst and as a managing director in capital markets, where he led a European team advising financial institutions. He studied economic history at the London School of Economics. James Medway. UK economist James Medway works at the New Economics Foundation, independent British think tank. He has also worked as a policy advisor for the UK Treasury. Christopher Wallace is head of economics at the UK's prestigious Colchester Royal Grammar School. He has been teaching economics for more than 25 years. Marcus Weeks studied philosophy and worked as a teacher before embarking on a career as an author. He has contributed to many books on the arts and popular sciences. Let the trading begin. So, this is the introduction to the Little Book of Economics. Juicy subject, right? I know everybody's so excited about this. All right, let's go. Few people would claim to know much about economics, perhaps seeing it as as a complex and esoteric subject with little relevance to their everyday lives. It has been generally felt to be the preserve of professionals in business, finance, and government. Yet most of us are becoming more aware of its influence on our wealth and well-being. And we may also have opinions, quite often quite strong ones, about the rising cost of living, taxes, government spending, and so on. Sometimes these opinions are based on an instant reaction to an item in the news, but they are also frequently the subject of discussions in the workplace or over the dinner table. So to some extent, we do all take an interest in economics. The arguments we use to justify our opinions are generally the same as those used by economists. So a better knowledge of their theories can give us a better understanding of the economic principles that are at play in our lives. Economics in the news. Today, with the world in apparent economic turmoil, it seems more important than ever to learn something about economics. Far from occupying a separate section of our newspaper or making up a small part of the television news, economic news now regularly makes the headlines. As early as 1997, the U.S. Republican political campaign strategist Robert Teeter noted its dominance, saying, "Look at the declining television coverage of politics. Look at the declining voting rate. Economics and economic news is what moves the country now, not politics." Yet how much do we really understand when we hear about rising unemployment, inflation, stock market crises, and deficits? When we're asked to tighten our belts or pay more taxes, do we know why? And when we seem to be at the mercy of risk-taking banks and big corporations, do we know how they came to be so powerful or understand the reasons for their original and continued existence? The discipline of economics is at the heart of questions such as these. The study of management. Despite the importance and centrality of economics to many issues that affect us all, economics as a discipline is often viewed with suspicion. A popular conception is that it is dry and academic due to its reliance on statistics, graphs, and formulas. The 19th century Scottish historian Thomas Carlyle described economics as the dismal science that is dreary, desolate, and indeed quite abject and distressing. Another common misconception is that it is all about money. And while this has a grain of truth, it is by no means the whole picture. So, what is economics all about? The word is derived from the Greek word oikonomia, meaning household management, and it has come to mean the study of the way we manage our resources, and more specifically, the production and exchange of goods and services. Of course, the business of producing goods and providing services is as old as civilization, but the study of how the process works in practice is comparatively new. It evolved only gradually. Philosophers and politicians have expressed their opinions on economic matters since the time of the ancient Greeks, but the first true economists to make a study of the subject did not appear until the end of the 18th century. At that time, the study was known as political economy and had emerged as a branch of political philosophy. However, those studying its theories increasingly felt that it should be distinguished as a subject in its own right and began to refer to it as economic science. This later became popularized in the shorter term and shorter form of economics, a softer science. Is economics a science? The 19th century economist certainly liked to think so, and although Carlyle thought it dismal, even he distinguished it with the label of science. Much economic theory was modeled on mathematics and even physics. Perhaps the "ix" ending of economics helped to lend it scientific respectability, and it sought to determine the laws that govern how the economy behaves in the same way that scientists had discovered the physical laws underlying natural phenomena. By the way, the ick or ix at the end of words just means pertaining to. So economics just means pertaining to the economy, right? Economics, however, are man-made and are dependent on the rational or irrational behavior of the humans that act within them. So, economics as a science has more in common with the soft sciences of psychology, sociology, and politics. Economics was perhaps best defined by British economist Lionel Robbins. In 1932, he described it in his essay on the nature and significance of economic science as the science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. This broad definition remains the most popular one in use today. Again, it's the science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. The most important difference between economics and other sciences, however, is that the systems it examines are fluid. As well as describing and explaining economies and how they function, economists can also suggest how they ought to be constructed or can be improved. The first economists. Modern economics emerged as a distinct discipline in the 18th century, in particular with the publication in 1776. Gosh, this years keep on coming around a lot. Remember, if you listened to or heard the previous wealth attraction research, the pilot that I did here, you remember that I was looking at 1775 in the book How Money Works. And let's see where that is so I make no mistakes. Yeah, I was looking at 1775 when the US dollar, the Continental Congress authorized the issue of the United States dollars in 1775, but the first national currency was not minted by the US Treasury until 1794. So 1775, and then of course the Declaration of Independence and the formation of the United States in 1776. And of course, 3 years before that was the Boston Tea Party, a revolt against taxes, and then the Revolutionary War followed on the heels of that. And now we have, what the hell? See, I read this before, but I didn't realize it, right? So, wow. Um, yeah, I didn't realize it. 1776 was The Wealth of Nations, written by the great Scottish thinker Adam Smith. By the way, I have that book in full. I have Wealth of Nations, which I'm going to be tapping into at some point in time through these studies. But wow. Okay, modern economics emerged as a distinct discipline in the 18th century, in particular with the publication in 1776 of The Wealth of Nations, written by the great Scottish thinker Adam Smith. However, what prompted interest in the subject was not so much the writings of economists as the enormous changes in the economy itself with the advent of the Industrial Revolution. Previous thinkers had commented on the management of goods and services within societies, treating questions that arose as problems for moral or political philosophy. But with the arrival of factories and mass producers of goods came a new era of economic organization that looked at the bigger picture. This was the beginning of the so-called market economy. Smith's analysis of the new system, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bust out, I'm going to break out fucking Wealth of Nations real quick. Hold on. There's a, there's some little segue right here. Okay, so looking at Wealth of Nations in the introduction here, um, yeah, the Wealth of Nations. So this is an introduction. I'm only going to read a very short snippet of this real quick. Wealth of Nations. This one that I have is edited by C.J. Bullock, PhD, professor of economics at Harvard University. Intro Introduction to this edition by Prasannan Parthasarathi. Prasannan Prasannan Parthasarathi. Sarat, Sarati, yeah. Partha Sarati. That's a cool name. Prasannan Parsa Sarati. Fall River Press, New York. Mm, let's see, introduction to the new edition. So it says about Adam Smith. Adam Smith is often seen as the first modern economist. His magnum opus, The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, is widely credited with laying the theoretical and philosophical foundations for the modern free market system, what Smith referred to as commercial society, but has since come to be known as capitalism. The work had an immediate impact on economic thinking, at first in Britain, and then from there in Britain's expanding global empire. As government servants and administrators began to design economic policies, especially in the crucial area of trade in foodstuffs, in light of its arguments for the freedom of trade, its economic influence extended to Europe as Danish, French, German, Italian, and Spanish editions soon appeared. The Wealth of Nations is far more than a work of economic theory, however. In this work, Smith presents a powerful blueprint for a stable and peaceful society which rests upon a hard-headed and realistic assessment of humans and their natures. Yeah, that's going to be good when I read that. Um, Wealth of Nations, right? Putting that aside, and this wonderful leather-bound copy that I have of it. Going back now into uh, um, economics, the introduction here from a little book of economics. I thought I'd share that Adam Smith segue there, since they're talking about Adam Smith, right? All right, almost done with this introduction here. Let's see. All right. Mm, yes. Big. So continuing. But with the arrival of factories and mass producers of goods came a new era of economic organization that looked at the bigger picture. This was the beginning of the so-called market economy. Smith's analysis of the new system set the standard with a comprehensive explanation of the competitive market. Smith suggested that the market is guided by an invisible hand where the rational actions of self-interested individuals ultimately give the wider society exactly what it needs. Hmm. Smith suggested that the market is guided by an invisible hand, where the rational actions of self-interested individuals ultimately give the wider society exactly what it needs. Smith was a philosopher, and the subject of his book was political economy. It stretched beyond economics to include politics, history, philosophy, and anthropology. After Smith, a new breed of economic thinkers emerged who chose to concentrate entirely on the economy. Each of these built upon our understanding of the economy, how it works, and how it should be managed, and laid the foundations for the various branches of economics. As the discipline evolved, economists identified specific areas to examine. One approach was to look at the economy as a whole, either at a national or international level, which became known as macroeconomics. This area of economics takes in topics such as growth and development, measurement of a country's wealth in terms of output and income, and its policies for international trade, taxation, and controlling inflation and unemployment. In contrast, what we now call microeconomics looks at the interactions of individual people and firms within the economy, the business of supply and demand, buyers and sellers, markets and competition. New schools of thought. Naturally, there were differences of opinion among economists, and various schools of thought evolved. Many welcomed the prosperity that the modern industrial economy brought and advocated a hands-off or laissez-faire approach to allow the competitive market to create wealth and stimulate technological innovation. Others were more cautious in their estimation of the market's ability to benefit society and identified failings of the system. They thought these could be overcome by state intervention and argued for a role of governments in providing certain goods and services and in curbing the power of the producers. In the analysis of some, notably the German philosopher Karl Marx, a capitalist economy was fatally flawed and would not survive. Speaking of Karl Marx, I also have a nice copy, a hardcover copy of the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And, scheiße, oh, dropping this little book all over the place. That may be something that I'll be looking into to contrast certain things about what he said and says in that book, because you can't have a complete study of wealth attraction research without looking at both the two dominating forces of economic theory in the world, which are capitalism and communism. I've got that, my United States Constitution, and several other books here that we'll be looking at. Continuing. All right, what did Marx? So, in the analysis of some, notably the German philosopher Karl Marx, a capitalist economy was fatally flawed and would not survive. The ideas of the early classical economists, such as Smith, were increasingly subjected to rigorous examination. By the late 19th century, economists educated in science were approaching the subject through the disciplines of mathematics, engineering, and physics. These neoclassical economists described the economy in graphs and formulas and proposed laws that governed the workings of the markets and justified their approach. By the end of the 19th century, economics was beginning to develop national characteristics. Centers of economic thinking had grown as university departments were established, and there were distinguishable differences between the major schools in Austria, Britain, and Switzerland, particularly on the desirability of some degree of state intervention in the economy. These differences became even more apparent in the 20th century when revolutions in Russia and China brought almost a third of the world under communist rule, with planned economies rather than competitive markets. The rest of the world, however, was concerned with asking whether the markets alone could be trusted to provide prosperity. While continental Europe and Britain argued about degrees of government intervention, the real battle of ideas was fought in the US during the Great Depression after the Wall Street crash of 1929. In the second half of the 20th century, the center of economic thought shifted from Europe to the US, which had become the dominant economic superpower and was adopting ever more laissez-faire policies. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, it seemed that the free market economy was indeed the route to economic success, as Smith had predicted. Not everyone agreed. Although the majority of economists had faith in the stability, efficiency, and rationality of the markets, there were some who had doubts, and new approaches arose. Alternative approaches. In the late 20th century, new areas of economics incorporated ideas from disciplines such as psychology and sociology into their theories, as well as new advances in mathematics and physics, such as game theory and chaos theory. These theorists also warned of weaknesses in the capitalist system. The increasingly severe and frequent financial crises that took place at the beginning of the 21st century reinforced the feeling that there was something fundamentally wrong in the system. At the same time, scientists concluded that our ever-increasing economic wealth came at a cost to the environment in the form of potentially disastrous climate change. As Europe and the US began to deal with perhaps the most serious economic problems they have ever faced, new economies have emerged, especially in Southeast Asia and the so-called BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And by the way, it's called BRICS now. When I was in China, I saw signs all over the place showing BRICS, BRICS, which includes South Africa now. So Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, but there's also in the BRICS summit coming up on August 22nd, 2003, there will be those five plus another 30 to 40 countries predicted to be about to be present there. So, um, again, as Europe and the US began to deal with perhaps the most serious economic problems they have ever faced, new economies have emerged, especially in Southeast Asia and the so-called BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Economic power is once again shifting, and no doubt new economic thinking will evolve to help manage our scarce resources. One prominent casualty of the recent economic crisis in Greece, where the history of economics started and where the word economics comes from. One prominent casualty of the recent economic crises is Greece, where the history of economics started and where the word economics comes from. In 2012, protesters in Athens pointed out that democracy also comes from the Greeks, but is in danger of being sacrificed in the search for a solution to a debt crisis. It remains to be seen how the world economy will resolve its problems, but armed with the principles of economics outlined in this book, you will see how we got into the present situation and perhaps begin to see a way out. Let the trading begin. There's that's the next section. It's called Let the Trading Begin. Ooh, wow. Make money from money is another section coming up there. These are really short. I like this book. Money causes inflation. Protect us from foreign goods. Oh, this is great. Oh, wow. This is going to be awesome. Let All right. So that was from the Little Book of Economics, which has several contributors. It's also from DK London, which, wow, there's a lot of people. There's DK London, DK Delhi. This was published in 2020 was this edition. Yeah, so first 2012 and then 2020 was the Dorling Kinderly Limited. It's a division of Penguin Random House LLC. Um, and that is the start there. Let's see. So I read previously in the pilot episode of this here on Wisdom, and I did successfully upload it to Spreaker, where you can actually download it yourself under World Reading Club on Spreaker. That's Spreaker. I think there might be an actual link from my site, exercisingyourmind.com. Let me take a look. I'm pretty sure there is, but I have so many projects that sometimes I am not. So it's research.exercisingyourmind.com, but I'm sure if you just type in exercisingyourmind.com, it should go there. We click on the little hamburger menu. Ooh, what is that? Ooh, huh? Ooh, I got a lot of stuff to fix on my website. There's a PayPal thing on there. It doesn't exist anymore. Oh, screw you. All right. Let me take a look here. Research.exercisingyourmind.com. Research. There should be a link there somewhere. Where is it? Oh, menu. About. All right. Is it on the about? Uh, does that link not work anymore either? Oh, good. So that one does. My donate page is there. Okay. Well, I wonder why the other one's not working. Replace that. World Reading Club. Is there a link to the podcast? It should be there somewhere. Well, there's one to the call-in page. Yeah, definitely got to update this. It's good to look at this stuff sometime. I always have to update my list of the authors that are on that site. Well, it is as it is. All right. So, all right. Well, in how money works, let's see, it's 17 minutes after 8. I started this at 50 minutes after 7, just about. I will not go a full hour, so it'll only be about 15 more minutes. How money works, the facts visually explained, ended off with going into economics, and that's why I picked up here. But this one starts with another little um, a little tour through history. So let's check it out. It's simply titled "Let the Trading Begin." Let the trading begin. 400 before Common Era to 1820 Common Era. All right. Well, that's a lot to cover in this short 2 little pages of tiny words. All right. Let's see. Let the trading begin. 400 BCE to 1820 CE. As civilizations evolved in the ancient world, so too did systems for providing goods and services. These early economic systems emerged naturally as various trades and crafts produced goods that could be exchanged. People began to trade, first by bartering and later with coins of precious metal, and trade became a central part of life. The business of buying and selling goods operated for centuries before it occurred to anyone to examine how the system actually worked. I'm really glad that these 2 books, which are both by Dorling Kindersley, whatever that publisher's name is, what is it? Dorling, oh my gosh. What is it called? Previously published in the economics book. Well, it's yeah, Kindersley. Dorling Kindersley Limited. They're both by that. The other one I'm mentioning is How Money Works, the facts visually explained. They both give a good history. This is exactly what I was looking for. This history is very important to see things, how they're leading up to date and how to make changes in that. This alchemy, this magic, this uh, this great works that people will embark upon. This is very interesting, these spells that have been cast upon the world. We have the counter spells in our hands. It's right in front of us, hidden in plain sight. All right. Rise of the city-states. A major change occurred in the 15th century as city-states were developed in Europe and became wealthy through international trade. A new, prosperous class of merchants replaced the feudal landowners as the important players in the economy, and they worked hand in hand with dynasties of bankers who financed their trading and voyages of discovery. New trading nations replaced small-scale feudal economies, and economic thinking began to focus on how best to manage the exchange of goods and money between countries. The dominant approach of the time, known as mercantilism, was concerned with the balance of payments, the difference between what a country spends on imports and what it earns from exports. To prevent a trade deficit and protect domestic producers against foreign competition, mercantilists advocated the taxing of imports. As trade increased, it moved beyond the hands of individual merchants and their backers. Partnerships and companies were set up, often with government backing, to oversee large trading operations. The huge increase in trading also prompted a renewed interest in the working of the economy and led to the beginnings of the discipline of economics, a new science. Emerging at the beginning of the 18th century, the Enlightenment, which prized rationality above all, took a scientific approach to political economy. Economists attempted to measure economic activity and described the working of the system rather than looking only at moral implications. One such economist was the Frenchman Jean Bodin. who noticed that the more money there is in circulation, the higher prices rise. The more money there is in circulation, the higher prices rise, which became a cornerstone idea of his quantity theory of money. Also in France, a group of thinkers known as the physiocrats analyzed the flow of money around the economy and produced the first macroeconomic whole economy model. They placed agriculture, rather than trade or finance, at the heart of the economy. Meanwhile, political philosophers in Britain shifted the emphasis away from mercantilists' ideas of trade and toward producers, consumers, and the value and utility of goods. The framework for the modern study of economics was emerging, and a Scotsman, Adam Smith, put flesh on the bones. Rational economic man. His background in the philosophy of British Enlightenment thinkers led Smith to approach the subject initially as one of moral philosophy. However, in his book The Wealth of Nations, 1776, he presented an analysis of the market economy at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and how it contributed to the economic welfare of the people. I just watched The Dark Knight Rises yesterday. That was my Bane voice. Central to his thesis was the concept of rational economic man. Central to his thesis was the concept of rational economic man. Smith argued that individuals made economic decisions on the basis of reason and self-interest, not for the good of society. Smith argued that individuals made economic decisions on the basis of reason and self-interest, not for the good of society. When they were allowed to act in this way in a free society with competitive markets, an invisible hand guided the economy for the benefit of all. This was the first detailed description of a free market economy, which Smith advocated as the means of ensuring prosperity and freedom, what we now know as capitalism. However, The Wealth of Nations was more than a description of the economy. It also examined issues such as the division of labor, the factors involved in giving value to goods, and weaknesses in the market economy, such as collusion between traders to raise prices. Ending protectionism. The most influential of Smith's followers, David Ricardo, put the final nail in the coffin of protectionism, as he showed how all countries, even those that were less productive, could benefit from free trade. The most influential of Smith's followers, David Ricardo, put the final nail in the coffin of protectionism as he showed how all countries, even those that were less productive, could benefit from free trade. He also cast a critical eye over the ways that government spending and borrowing affect the economy. Many of Smith's ideas were also taken up by the French physiocrat school, most notably Anne Robert Jacques Turgot and Francois Quesnay, or Quesnay, I'm going to say Quesnay. Let's see. So many of Smith's ideas were also taken by the French physiocrat school, most notably Anne Robert Jacques Turgot and Francois Quesnay, who argued for a fair system of taxation, and Jean-Baptiste Say, who first described the relationship between supply and demand in a market economy. Hmm. Okay. Wow. Well, that's a little bit. The next section here is you don't need to barter when you have coins. The function. Oh, I love it. Oh, yeah. It's going down. All right. Well, it is about 8:27 p.m. That's 20 hours and 27 minutes. here on the East Coast of the United States, where I am now in Richmond, Virginia. And that's where I'll end it for now because I've got places to go, people to see. There's going to be a lot of people today, tonight. So I'm going to pack up my stuff and see if I can fetch myself a body fueling meal before I continue. Put these bookmarks in here, get these books situated, and go off to the races. Yeah, this is when I start. I start working in the afternoon, studying and reading, and then uh, put down the books and get on the road at about 9 o'clock or so. Sometimes a little bit afterwards, depending on what's going on. But this has been Wealth Attraction Research, War, Intro to Economics. You can also look at some great articles by various different authors that I work with on exercisingyourmind.com, where great health is truest of all wealth. You've been listening to Wealth Attraction Research, presented by Hakeem Alibokis Alexander, here on Wisdom Social Audio Inc. and Spreaker Social Podcasting, presented for World Reading Club in association with exercisingyourmind.com and UniquilibriuM. Until next time.